Hello everybody, welcome to the Football Daily Weekly. Pleasure to have you joining us. We are in the presence of Laurence McKenna and Barnaby Slater from SpurredOn TV. Gentlemen.
Best Spurs channel around.
There you are.
Definitely.
It's a good channel.
Barnaby, you'd
certainly
agree?
in the top one of one, I'd say.
Yeah, well we're all happy with that. We've got a Q&A for you, ladies and gentlemen. You've asked us some questions, we're going to provide you with the answers. And we're going to kick off things about Spurs. Barnaby, you're here.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Oh, right.
And Dave is asking, will Spurs make any more signings and will they get into the top four?
Well, let me start this on a positive and say yes, I am 100% confident that Spurs will make some more signings.
Hey, there it is.
We are just about to sell Benjamin Stambouli, or by the time this comes out, he's probably already gone to Paris Saint-Germain for kind of 6 million. I think we got him for 4. He played about 12 times, so we've naturally sold him for 6. That's the kind of business that Daniel Levy likes to do. So he'll be on his way out. I think Adebayor will leave if he finally allows himself to go and try and play some football. And a few more kind of deadwood players will leave. And with that money, we will then make some more signings. Now, the rumours that I've heard over the weekend, a little cheeky bid for Saido Berahino, and I think that could be interesting. They're talking about 15 million. I doubt West Brom would sell him for that. But the thing that I like about him is he would offset Harry Kane pretty well, kind of little man, big man, but also he can play in any of those 3 behind the front 1 positions as well. So he can play out wide if and when Lamela tries to do things that he can't possibly do, which he seems to do quite a lot. And I just think he would be a good signing, young, English. He's just sacked that terrible agent who he shared with Raheem Sterling.
That's right.
So he sounds like he's got a good kind of head on his shoulders to some degree.
Yeah, what do you think
How's
about
AD
Spurs?
Ward ever going to work again?
Is
the more pressing question.
Does he need to get work
I was about to
again?
say, I don't think after that Sterling
that
deal,
signing,
he can
yeah.
do whatever he wants.
That's a really
he
good
can
point.
open a winery in the Florence
Let's say
region.
minimum he's on 10%. That's £4.9 million he's just taken home.
Outrageous. Well, any more signings for Spurs? Do you look at Spurs and you think they could do with a couple more signings, especially if they're going to get into the top 4? Or do you think actually they're looking pretty good? They've got Pochettino, obviously there, he's had a season under his belt now.
Isn't that the point of Pochettino, is that Pochettino, especially at Southampton, made a lot of the, in inverted commas, little that he had. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way, I just mean that...
It sounds pretty disparaging.
But that's where he did that though.
Yeah.
Just in comparison with other teams, he made the most of what he had.
He made the most of a great youth academy, and that's kind of what he's bringing to Spurs as well. He's picking players out of the youth ranks and giving them their chance, which we weren't doing as much for the previous few years. Whilst Harry was in charge as well, he was more into buying, that 1 January where he bought Louis Saha and Ryan Nelson. Potentially you could say that it would have been just as beneficial to throw in a couple of the young academy graduates and say, bring us something new.
So how much synergy is there between what Pochettino is doing and what Levy's doing?
A total synergy. I think Pochettino...
Total synergy.
Yeah, I think Pochettino is there because Levy realised that the big spend didn't work. It wasn't going to happen again. So they're going to buy young again and hope they become those kind of Gareth Bale, Luka Modric players that then, either we have to sell on, or hopefully if the whole, when the new stadium comes in and we're able to pay a bit of a higher wage, we'll be able to keep hold of and grow as a club.
You're thinking realistically perhaps not top 4 this season? There's always a chance.
I think we'll fight for it, but I think we would need a Man United, an Arsenal and potentially Liverpool to have a bad season.
Laurence, top 4 for Spurs?
Maybe in a few years' time. I think I like where you're coming from with the plan of the stadium and stuff, but I just wonder if that's what the club know, and so this is that time where they think we just need to stay about here, and if they push any further, then that's almost a nice extra.
Yeah. Mandar's asking, do you think Alexis Sanchez will perform, or outperform rather, Eden Hazard this season? I mean, Hazard was the player of the season, he was phenomenal, but Sanchez was very good as well. Some people would have suggested he might have been player of the season as well.
Yeah.
But I think we all agree Hazard was probably worthy of that award. Laurence, do you think Sanchez can outdo the Belgian?
I think the question is just alluding to the fact, can he keep up with that top line of players in the Premier League? And I think he will. And I just think it's that simple. He's had a good South American trip this summer. You
Copa
think
America.
No, but I was trying to not say Copa America because I was going to say it later in my sentence.
Okay.
He's had a good trip to South America this summer, and obviously...
What was he doing there?
The Copa America,
Oh,
Marcus,
right, okay,
yes.
that's
because, they ended up doing pretty well in that competition, and he ended up being quite a good player for them. And a lot of people immediately printing headlines of, if he can do that for Arsenal, then he will take them all the way. You'd say that Arsenal probably have a slightly different challenge over more games in a slightly trickier competition on more fronts. What I'd like to see is Arsenal doing that in the Champions League. So I think if he can do it in the Champions League, yes, that will take him above Eden Hazard.
Yeah, when you look at a player like Sanchez, Barnaby, do you think...
Wish we got him.
Well, clearly, but do you think he can realistically win, say, the Football Writers Player of the Year next season? Because Hazard... There was a lot of hype with Hazard before he went to Chelsea, of course, but he's really kind of fulfilled that potential, and you can almost see he's growing. He's still learning the game. Sanchez is very much a sort of an impact type of player. Is there a danger that he can? I mean, he seems to have the energy of about 5, athletes. Yeah. Is there a danger maybe that he can sort of slightly burn out or anything like that, or do you think he can really actually just kick on?
Well, it's interesting that you say burn out, because what I was going to say in answer to the tweet from the nice person who tweeted in is my personal opinion is that Eden Hazard's had a nice summer break.
Yes.
And the Copa America came, and Alexis Sanchez was completely vital to Chile's winning of that tournament.
And there was a lot of pressure on him because it was in Chile.
And it was in Chile, and he was one of the few players who didn't get drunk and crash his car into a ditch. So well done to him.
Wasn't one of them.
But I may have been exaggerating slightly, but thank you for picking that out.
Yeah.
What I would say is, therefore, I think it's less likely that he will push on past Eden Hazard this season. And then to go on about what you also said, I think the Mourinho effect is so important on players like Eden Hazard. And I think if Mourinho hadn't rejoined Chelsea, I don't think Eden Hazard would have won the personal accolades that he did, because I think Mourinho knows how to get the best out of his players.
Hazard actually, and as Barnaby said as well, that Mourinho moulded him. There was a bit of discomfort there in the relationship, because Hazard obviously was a fantastic player. Mourinho came along and said, I want more out of you. I want to make you an even more functional player. Yeah. And he managed to mould him like that, whereas Sanchez, it just seems that he's like a dog with a bone, isn't he? Just go off and do your stuff.
But he was already fantastic. And he'd already come from a club where they taught him quite a lot and progressed him already. He wasn't the finished article though, and he's still not the finished article because he's still quite young.
Yeah,
I think that's where Mourinho's man management is second to none. It's even where some managers wouldn't dare to go to one of their biggest ever signings and say, you're not doing well enough. Mourinho has got a big enough personality where he can do that, and they take it and they move on.
If we're comparing or we're sort of contrasting the two, I think you make a great point about Hazard developing under Mourinho and him asking for more out of him. But then you look at, maybe we've forgotten about some of the best things that Wenger did with Vieira, Henry, all those guys who are at another level.
Henry, certainly.
He didn't necessarily go, Vieira himself, he pulled the best out of him. And other players as well that he just took to the next level. And all those guys were a different kind of player to Hazard. You'd argue they were closer to a Sanchez in terms of personality. And also explosive in themselves. So maybe it's good for the Premier League in general that both of those
are you saying you think Sanchez will have a better season than Hazard?
Yes.
Interesting. I'm saying not. I think Hazard will be fresher and more confident in all, and will have a better season.
Okay, there you are. Dewey Owen is asking, how do you feel ground sharing with Arsenal? This is Spurs.
I feel fine.
As it is looking very unlikely for Wembley. Barnaby, ground sharing with Arsenal, would that be something that would just be, you can't even comprehend such a suggestion?
Changing those seats week in, week out would be annoying.
Tough. Firstly, I was wondering whether, is it Dewey Owen or is it Dowie Owen? Wasn't there that old rugby player called Dowie Morris that was spelled like that?
Oh, like, as in, is it an Irish name? Dowie?
I'm just asking, but anyway.
Well, Mr. Owen is asking.
Mr. Owen.
D.O.
Mr. Owen. This is a tough one, obviously, because I think the default setting for most Spurs fans is going, we can't share with them. We can't share with them. But as a realist Spurs fan and a very passionate Spurs fan, I've got to say, you've got to sometimes think common sense. Okay, the options as they stand at the moment are Wembley looking very expensive. Chelsea can afford to pay them Wembley more money than Spurs, and MK Dons, which is 54 miles away. And, it's a 34,000 seater stadium and whatever, and maybe you'll get some people from Milton Keynes coming out to see football matches, which they wouldn't otherwise, but how many of the actual, proper season ticket holding Spurs fans going to go 54 miles, so 108 miles there and back, especially think of all the night games realistically as well. So what's going to happen? So sometimes you've got to think of it common sense. I would personally say, it worked in Milan, why can't it work for us for a season? We go over there and we do it. But
they have a half red, half blue stadium.
Yeah, but they
have stands dedicated to each fan. They
have
also AC at one end.
Palace and Wimbledon shared at Sellers for a long time. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to play common sense, and just realise you're on a lose-lose for that season, whatever. Yeah. So make the best out of the situation. Now, what no one has asked in all of this newspaper talk and whatever is, Arsenal haven't come out and said it would be fine by us. So what would they want actually from us? They'd probably ask for a hell of a lot of money. You know, and if Chelsea are offering, I think it is like 14 to go and be at Wembley, realistically, are Arsenal going to ask for much less? Probably not, so we might as well, you know. And then the main common sense thing is what I would say is Chelsea and Spurs should go together, Abramovich and Levy should go together to the FA and say, let's do this thing at Wembley, 1 week on, 1 week off. The FA are desperate for money all the time. They play the semi-finals at Wembley, which ruins the whole credibility of the competition, just so they can pay off the stadium, which they mucked up in the first place. It was built with a retractable roof in mind, and then they ran out of money, so it's got a 2/3 retractable roof, like no other stadium in the whole world. Completely crazy. So if they need money that much,
exclusive.
Take the money. It's completely ridiculous.
Laurence, what are you thinking?
What I worry about, and this is what I don't really care who plays where. It would be great if Spurs play at Emirates. It would be great if they play at Wembley. Do you think they could fill Wembley? I think they could, right?
I think that from what I've read and heard, the top tier wouldn't be available for club matches. So you're looking at only having to fill 50,000 seats.
Okay.
Which they would. Their current season ticket waiting list is 45,000. And that's on top of the 36,000 that we have. So
why wouldn't the top tier be available?
Well, just an FA thing.
That's just what I read. I think.
I mean, if you pay your money, just.
Yeah, I mean, you know, realistically, do I think for Stoke at home on a Saturday at 3 p.m. are we going to get 80,000 people there? Probably not.
No, but it would be lovely to see. I think what I would say is, what happens in the time. I mean, what we often forget. You know, we talk about running big businesses here. What happens to the people who work at Spurs Stadium on a Saturday?
Stewards. I used to be a steward at Spurs, so you can ask me about that.
I mean, so would they get taken with Spurs to the new stadium,
or
is it that
I think realistically,
will provide that?
If we went to the MK Dons, let's say as an example, then they would use a company located close to MK Dons. So yes, all those people would be out of work. They are temporary workers anyway. I think more is the kind of almost like the catering managers.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Like that.
And what about the people outside the ground?
They will lose their jobs for a year.
Obviously, they would lose their jobs for a while, but then unfortunately that's the way it is. We don't want to see that. But if they come back with a bigger stadium, there would be more.
Yeah, there'd be more work, but also it's better for them. It's better for them than if we'd moved to Stratford, which at one point was mooted as well.
Begrudgingly, yes, you're thinking.
I think common sense would say first Emirates and second Chelsea and Spurs getting together to try and sort that Wembley deal.
Quickly, Arsenal.
Yeah.
You think this makes sense?
Yes.
Thomas Robinson is asking the question: who do Manchester City need to sign to win the title, Laurence? They've made a few signings.
A young English winger, slow attacker, and say someone in the midfield that can offer some young English talent. And then I think they're pretty much on their way to the title, mate. Because we all know that if you buy people who were happy to leave another club where they were lauded, then you will do well yourselves.
Bitter Liverpool
fan
there.
Some cynicism.
Yeah. I'm bitter. You know who I'm more bitter for? Villa.
Right.
Because Liverpool can sustain the loss of Raheem Sterling, and that's fine.
Like they did with Suarez.
Yeah, because he was as critical. They can sustain that loss because they have more money to invest, and you've seen their off-season investments. What I would be unhappy for is Aston Villa, who consistently lose players to Man City, and it just. It must be a bit of a sickener to have him come out and say, I'm staying. And then he was the captain of the club, and it was sort of, you hear his comments in January. I understand the lure of money, I understand those sort of things, but there's still a question mark there for me over whether it was best for him to go to City.
Hard to feel sorry. You're a Liverpool fan.
Yeah.
Hard to feel sorry for Villa as a Liverpool fan when you're just about to take their big striker for £32 million, isn't it? The evaluation can still be separate from my own interest, if you know. Yeah.
It was poor business from Aston Villa, absolutely, but good business from Manchester City. Do you think with those two signings, Delph and Sterling, will that give them a bigger chance of winning the league? Do they need something more? Though?
Yeah, I think the question's an interesting one. Who do they need to sign to win the league? My personal opinion is they need to keep Aguero fit. That is the number one thing that will make the difference between them pushing Chelsea and not pushing Chelsea. On top of that, I think it's just a really strange situation where they're basically buying on a quota system. They're basically buying players just so that they can fill that English quota.
Well, that's exactly what they're doing. Yeah.
But they have to.
Homegrown talent.
But I think that makes it a fascinating thing. You've got this big rich club who can, in essence, go out and buy anyone and don't care about the financial fair play rules anyway. But they're having to pay this money for these English players who I'm not sure are going to get in the team. I think there's a high chance, I've said it before, Sterling will spend a lot of time on the bench. And how will he take that? I don't think he'll take that well. In terms of who do they need to buy?
Are they going to be a selling club next summer?
I think they need an injection of youth to kind of offset your kind of spine of Company, Yaya Toure, Aguero. I'd go for Ross Barkley if I were them.
From outside, it's difficult to evaluate City, isn't it? Because it almost seems like they're, again, all the criticism that people level at them, you're trying to buy culture, you're trying to buy your way up to the top of the league, seems to be playing into that. I mean, spending 49 million on Sterling in the first place, I know spending 8 million on Delph is left, so they can almost offset that and say you almost bought both for 30. But if they bought someone like Barkley, that's another 30. That's 90 million on 3 English players. But then you still level the idea of you're buying an English culture there at them, and you've not developed that, even though you've just made yourselves a youth academy. Which, if you waited for the fruit to come from that, then you wouldn't have to buy these young guys. So I guess, but that's the outside evaluation. I'm wondering what is City's plan, because they don't seem to be awfully vocal about it, and I think that frustrates a lot of English pundits because normally there's sort of a much more evident plan that people are working to. We could see that with United and Ferguson, or at least we thought we could. We saw the same at Arsenal. Wenger was quite transparent about that. We saw roughly the same with Mourinho, and he doesn't hide the fact that he doesn't bring much youth through. He's happy to spend in certain summers, and almost the press buy into that. But City aren't quite playing the same game.
Well, Man City, of course, are in Australia for a pre-season tour. But Barnaby, yourself and SpurredOn TV are going to Munich for a pre-season tour.
We are 4th to 6th of August. It is Tottenham Hotspur and then some little clubs, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich and Milan in a 4-way tournament.
I mean, is it 4-way? That's going one way for me.
It's
Spurs
are going to win.
Spurs.
Yeah.
4th to 6th of August we'll be there. So find us on YouTube, SpurredOn TV, and look out for some top lederhosen-based content.
Does that mean Gareth Bale will be playing Spurs for the first time since he left them?
Oh, does he get in their starting 11 anymore?
Probably not.
That's awkward.
Probably not.
No, in fairness, Gareth Bale, the best player I've seen live in my lifetime at Spurs. So I would never say a bad word. He got the dream move he wanted. I hope that with the new stadium, will get bought out by a big American conglomerate. Gareth will come back to finish his career at Big Lane. That's the plan.
With the Audi Cup on show.
With the Audi Cup just being lifted by Hugo Lloris and his slightly injured wrist that may or may not be broken.
But that could push Gareth Bale over the edge if Spurs, when Spurs win the Audi Cup and they are lifting the trophy, Bale will think to himself, ooh, that could have been me then.
Like a Michu-esque player at Real Oviedo.
I think that he'll think, God, the Decima was nothing compared to this Audi Cup. So
when you're driving out in your bloody Audi, mate, then you're jealous, aren't you?
There we are, exactly. Do check out SpurredOn TV with Barnaby and friends in Munich. That'll be a lovely old affair. Lawrence, thank you very much as always.
I R8 their channel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Less said about that, the better. Thank you very much for your questions. Get your comments in below.
Like Audi.
And we'll see you next time.